Hey guys, it's Madison, and at the end of January, I decided to set a little bit of a challenge for myself. My university has winter break from mid-December through the end of February, so unlike most American universities, the winter break is the longer kind of vacation time of the year. And so while I had this break from work and after I had come back from the States, I found that I was not being quite as productive as I was hoping. And so at the end of January, I decided to set a bit of a language learning challenge for myself to try and spur myself into being a bit more productive and not as lazy with my free time during my long holiday. So the goal that I set for myself was from Monday through Friday of that week, I wanted to spend an average of 6 to 8 hours of language learning activities per day, which is a lot, but like I said, I was doing very little on my vacation time, and so I figured, hey, if there's any time to do a kind of pushing the limits kind of challenge, this was the time to do it. And so I set the goal of 6 to 8 hours. That could include like passive, just watching shows and stuff as well. But the goal was also to spend a decent chunk of time every single day that week doing active studying for my 3 target languages, Korean, Mandarin, and Japanese. And even though I set that relatively high goal for myself, knowing myself like I do, I know that I'm not a very consistent person. So I figured that I probably wouldn't be perfect at achieving this goal throughout the week, but I figured even if I didn't meet the goal on some of the days in the week, I would still be studying a lot more than I would otherwise. And so I still considered it a win as long as I was actively doing some studying stuff every day from that week, Monday through Friday. So yeah, that was the goal, and let's go ahead and see how I did.
라고 단언할 수 있을 것 같아요. 근데 이제 이별을 이제야 말로 이별을 구할 때가 오잖아요.
髪が短いです。
お姉さん、優しそうな人ですね。
불만을 좀 얘기할까요? 아니면은 지켜볼까요? 왜 지켜?
신작 소설이라고도 했습니다. 국민의힘은 총체적 국기문란이라고 했습니다. 이정 기자.
我从图书馆出来，外面下着大雨，我根本不懂。
韓国芸能界一とも言われる抜群の運動神経を誇るシャイニーのミー誰よりも早く動き出した。 残り75分になるとエリアの端から100体のハンターが放出される。阻止する方法はない。
100体なるぞ。100体はもう俺に無理やから阻止できんじゃない、逃げ切られへん。
今の私です。昔です。子供の時の私です。
越来越多年轻人发现他们的父母开始上网
So yeah, that was my week of fairly intensive language learning. And after the week ended, I had a lot of fun kind of playing around with the data that I collected over the week, seeing how much I had studied of each language, that kind of stuff. So I went ahead and made a few graphs on Google Sheets because I am a nerd like that. And so looking at the week overall, you can see that I did pretty well throughout the course of the week. Obviously on Wednesday and Thursday, I lost a bit of the motivation that I had the first 2 days, but I did manage to regain it on Friday. And Wednesday, I got pretty close to the goal, so I'm really very happy with how much I got accomplished this week. It's clear to see from looking at the graph that I definitely spent the most time on Korean. And with the exception of the first day where I didn't do any Mandarin, every single other day I did at least a little bit in every single language, so I was very happy with how that turned out. And then if you just look at only the active studying time, so taking away things like just passively watching a show, listening to a podcast, stuff like that, and you can see that still it's a decent amount of time every single day spent studying these 3 languages. Over an hour and a half every single day of active study, which is way more than I typically do. If you look at what I did day by day, the amount of time that I spent on different languages kind of varied throughout the week, but overall, definitely Korean was the top language by far that I spent time in, whether you look at the total time overall or the active time, which makes sense since that's the most high-level language for me and the most, I guess, easy, you could say, language for me. It's easier for me to spend a lot of time in that language without getting as exhausted compared to, say, Japanese, where I'm at a much lower level, so everything I do, it takes a lot more exertion and I get a lot more tired more easily. But yeah, like I said, overall, I'm super happy. If you add up all the time, it's over 30 hours of language learning time that I spent overall. Just looking at active time, it's still 11 and a half hours of active studying in a week, which, like I said, is way more than I usually do. So overall, I'd say that this week was a resounding success, and it definitely kind of pushed me out of my treasury of mostly just spending my days watching a lot of YouTube and some dramas. So I was very happy with how this experiment little thing turned out. That being said, I also wanted to add a little splash of my typical reality to this video as well, so that you guys don't misunderstand and think that I'm always a super productive person, which I am very much not. Since this little Monday through Friday experiment included the end of the month of January, I went ahead and punched some numbers for the overall month of January as well. That's the really nice thing about kind of keeping track of the time that you do things on certain days, is that you have all this beautiful data that you can analyze later. And so if you plot all the time that I spent on these 3 languages throughout the entire month of January, you get this chart, which, as you can see, has its ups and downs. There's definitely plenty of days where I did absolutely nothing, and there's days where you can see I did quite a bit, including those last 2 days of the month, which were part of this kind of challenge week. So out of the 31 days of January, I spent 21 days doing at least something related to these 3 languages, even if it's just watching a show for fun, that kind of stuff, which is definitely a majority of the days, so I'm pretty happy with that. And if you break it down by language, you can see that actually almost half of that time is spent in Mandarin, followed by Korean, and then Japanese being a much tinier little portion of that circle. However, if you just take into account the active study time over the month, you can see that almost all of that Mandarin goes away, which is because I watch a lot of Mandarin TV shows and don't do a lot of active studying. So yeah, a lot of days just go away entirely because most days I do not actively study. Although I will say this month I spent 14 out of 31 days actively studying, which I would say is probably more than average. For me, I don't think I usually actively study quite that much over the course of a month. So it was still a pretty good month, even once you take away all of the just fun drama watching days that I do. So yeah, once you consider only active time studying, you can see that Mandarin drops way down to last place out of my 3 languages, and Korean takes the strong lead, again, because it's the easiest thing for me to study because it's the highest level thing for me. In terms of the total number of hours I spent studying, I spent over 50 hours in the course of January on language learning stuff, including the dramas and fun stuff, which again for me is quite a high number. In the past, I didn't really track my time as much as I have been recently, so I can't really compare it to past months, but I would say that most months I do not spend 50 hours on language learning unless I was really binging a lot of dramas that month. So I would suspect that's much higher than normal. And in terms of just active time, that number is 14 hours. So a much smaller number once you take away all of the shows that I watch. But even then, that is not bad for me. So I'm pretty happy with that. And if you look at the chart, the last 2 days of the month, which were part of this kind of big intensive challenge, actually account for a huge chunk of that time. That's what, over 5 hours of language learning on those last 2 days. So taking that out of the active time throughout January up until the last 2 days, I only spent like 9 hours on language learning through the whole month. So yeah, you can see based on this that despite the language learning that I show here in these videos and the productivity that I try to highlight in these videos, I am not usually that productive of a person, and I'm definitely not a very consistent person, as you can see. And I mentioned this before on my channel, but I'm the kind of person who tends to kind of have these huge bursts of motivation where I study for a lot, kind of like this past week, and the challenge I set for myself. And then I also have these slumps where I do nothing for like a month or 2 except for watch dramas. And I can be honest, it's been a little while since I did this productivity week, and I have not done very much studying, at least active studying, since then. I have watched a few dramas since then, but I haven't done much active studying. So once again, the ebbs and flows keep ebbing and flowing. So yeah, I'm curious to see how my February numbers will come out. My overall numbers might actually be higher since I've binge watched a few dramas, but I suspect that my active studying time will be lower than January, just because I have not been doing very much this month so far. But anyway, that was my little nerdy stats breakdown of my productive week, as well as January as a whole. I'm really looking forward to continuing to keep track of my language learning, because looking at these charts and stats and stuff is really fascinating, at least for me, hopefully for you watching as well. But yeah, that's all I have to say for today, and until next time, annyeong.